few months ago now, I started spreading my wings, starting to just look a little further afield, games aside from Games Workshop that might suit my needs better. And this was mostly due to just getting a bit burnt out on 40k. And if you've been following that journey, you probably will have seen at this point me getting pretty hooked on Battletech. The amazing, deep and rich lore, the incredible, super fun video games, and those lovely, cute miniatures have definitely got me really interested. And whilst I have every intention of also pursuing the tabletop wargame side of that whole hobby, that's not the thing that's got its hooks deepest in me. No, that title, that has to go to Infinity. Saw it, I loved it, and I was immediately excited to get playing it on the tabletop. So today I want to talk about how I got into it, why I got into it, and kind of just give a little overview of where I'm at with my journey as a painter, as a player, and as a collector of Infinity. My hope is also that this video can serve as a bit of a guide to the do's and don'ts of how to get into exploring the human sphere. Okay, so first of all, we should probably talk about first steps, so that if, like me, you are a wobbly-legged doe just taking their first tentative steps into Infinity, you can get an idea of where to start. And we'll most definitely take a minute to discuss what I did right and what I definitely did wrong. And so the first burning question that you're probably going to want to know if you're looking to get into this game is what you should buy first. And well, that's going to largely depend on whether you're predominantly a player of tabletop miniatures games or a painter of tabletop miniatures. So first of all, let's just talk about what I did, and then you can maybe get an idea of what you want to do from there. This video is definitely going to serve as a little bit of a cautionary tale as much as it does an introduction. So as someone who mainly paints miniatures and probably even in an ideal world would only be playing a game or so every 2 weeks, I decided to approach Infinity as a painter first and a gamer second. I picked up the Operation Wildfire battle box because, well, it was labelled as a starter set and it contained one of the 2 factions I was really interested in starting with, which was O12. And the problem was that as soon as I had those really beautiful minis in my hand and I could actually appreciate them firsthand, I immediately wanted more, because I'm a painter, so if I see pretty minis I want them in my collection so that I can one day paint them. And I knew full well that the Wildfire contents would take me months to get through most likely, but still wanted more. So from there I went to eBay and I picked up an Operation Cowdstrom box second hand, along with a couple of extra bits like a Yu-Ching booster and a paint set. And then I grabbed Operation Crimson Stone on pre-order with the extra minis. And yes, I was aware by this point that I'd definitely bought too much, but I mean, on the upside, that did give me the perspective I needed to be able to create this very video. So I guess it was okay. Okay, so if you primarily just want to paint these minis, a battle box is still not a bad idea, to be honest. You're gonna get a good range of minis that way. Just maybe avoid what I did and don't buy 3 of them. And considering that it's the latest box, providing that you like the included miniatures, Operation Crimson Stone is probably the smart place to start. Not only will this give you 14 or maybe even 15 miniatures to paint depending on which version you get, but you'll also have things like scenery and a playmat and stuff like that, so if you do decide you want to dip your toes into the game, you'll have the stuff that you need to play, and that will be handy. That said, if you're mostly looking to paint the miniatures, then any of the battle boxes will suffice, and yeah, I mean, you might not have the latest, most up-to-date rules, but we'll be talking about a solution to that later anyway. Now, if you're primarily a player, it does get a little bit more complicated to make the right decision, because essentially any of the starter boxes are technically the right choice in the sense that they contain 2 sets of miniatures to play against each other, they have terrain, they have a table mat, they have all the essentials you need in those battle boxes, The main difference is really just the rule. Infinity has two different rule sets. There's Code 1, which is kind of a stripped back, lighter version of the game. It doesn't currently contain all of the factions from the game, but they are being added to each time. Two new factions have been introduced fairly recently, and it looks like the pattern going forward is going to be for two new factions to come in each time now. But then we also have N4, which is the full fat, weighty, rules heavy experience. Many players definitely start off with N4, and I think that can be where the game gets a reputation for being very complicated. N4 is an extremely advanced rule set. I don't recommend starting there though. I think Code 1 is the place that you should start, because that's what it's designed for. Everything that you learn in Code 1, then later, as you're more comfortable with the rules, gets added to when you graduate to N4. Whereas if you learn N4 and you're still kind of fairly new to those rules, but you want to play a game of Code 1 with someone because that's the version of the rules they know, you've now got to unlearn rules that you're not fully familiar with in the first place. And Corvus Belli makes this pretty clear. They say that Code 1 is where you should start and N4 is where you should graduate to. So I'm going to trust the people that make the game. So if you primarily want to get into playing Infinity, my recommendation for your first pickups is just going to be whatever battle box you most like and the Code 1 rulebook, which by the way in the UK, it's only sort of 10 to 12 quid. It's really not an expensive additional purchase. So the TLDR for this section is just buy a battle box and the Code 1 rulebook basically. Now I approached Infinity kind of like I would any other game, to be honest with you. I was thinking about the painting experience and the miniatures first, and there was a lot of fun to be had there looking into that side of it. Maybe so much that I might have got a little drunk on excitement. But this doesn't need to happen to you, and that's the good news, because it turns out, on a little bit of a closer look, Infinity is brilliantly well catered to on Tabletop Simulator. In the new world order of COVID-19, many wargamers have become intimately aware recently of just how great Tabletop Simulator can be at making wargames more accessible for people that otherwise might be struggling to get into them. And if you don't know what it is and what it does, then there is a video that I'll link down in the description by Vault SC, where they talk about first steps of getting into playing Infinity on Tabletop Simulator. But essentially it's basically exactly what it sounds like. It's a computer program that simulates a tabletop, upon which you can play games. But a bunch of absolute fucking shamans have put together an all-encompassing mod for TTS that you can use to play everything from the intro missions through to Code 1 and all the way to N4. There's even simple 2D miniatures for all the current units, as well as pre-made maps, markers and templates. With the two links that I'll add to the description underneath that video, it's literally a one-stop shop. What's better still is that everything included is based on the official terrain and artwork, meaning you get a truly genuine feel for what playing Infinity on a real tabletop looks like. The mods are fully featured, and there's even a Discord for TTS Infinity, which when you grab the main mod, you'll see linked in the workshop listing on Steam. So if you add to that the fact that the basic quick start rules are available completely free of charge as a PDF direct from Corvus Belli, and then all of the stat lines and everything are available in a fully featured mobile app that's also free and official, you can basically try Infinity for the cost of Tabletop Simulator, which is cheap. Really cheap. So if you're curious and want to look into the game, that's actually definitely the smartest idea, because well, you'll get a look at things like the terrain, the actual miniatures, the rules, the gameplay, the feel of the whole thing. You'll get it all there. And of course, once you've bought in physically and you are now a bona fide actual Infinity player, there's absolutely nothing stopping you from continuing to also play on Tabletop Simulator. Like, that's going to allow you to play with your overseas friends, for example, something that I personally have a real need for. So the real 9000 IQ play is probably to grab Tabletop Simulator and use the free resources that are out there, and enjoy Infinity first of all on an introductory level without actually buying in. And so from there, from those first steps, it really, to be honest, starts to become much more about you. You kind of take the game in a direction that best suits you as an individual. For example, if you're finding Code 1 a bit easy and that's making it uninteresting to you, just grab the N4 rulebook and start learning N4. It also comes bundled with a stunning sourcebook that is absolutely packed with lore about the setting. If you want to paint a broader range of Infinity's miniatures, grab a couple of blister packs. Blister packs start at £8 or £9 in the UK, and obviously that's just a single character miniature, but they're still really nice, they're still Infinity miniatures, and they'll allow you to sort of feed that painting addiction while you put aside some bigger sums of money for some larger gaming purchases. Want to buy into a completely different army that wasn't in the starter box that you bought? Well, you've got options there as well. For a start, the older starter boxes are certainly still available, both from stores online and through eBay. If you want an army that isn't in one of those starter boxes, or you just want a different army to what's included specifically in terms of miniatures, there's the mission packs, the advanced packs, and the starter packs, all of which provide actual playable miniatures at a volume discount. In the UK, the range for those starter products is £40 to £80, and Corvus Belli makes a point of not putting rubbish into them. You'll be able to use everything that you get in them, if you want to maybe start exploring the lore a little bit deeper. Then you've got the N4 sourcebook that was mentioned previously, and you've also got the amazing Outrage and Betrayal graphic novels. Well, okay, that's a little bit confusing. One's kind of a manga, but it reads left to right and it's in English, and it's sort of a manga-y graphic novel. The other one's definitely a graphic novel. If you want podcasts, you can check out Mayacast or Loss of Lieutenant. That happens to be my favourite one. And those are really good. You'll be able to grab them through just, your usual podcast outlets. I listen to Loss of Lieutenant on Spotify when I'm in bed at night, and it has a handy sleep timer on it, so it won't keep playing stuff in my ear once I get to sleep. So in case it wasn't abundantly clear at this point, the world is indeed your lobster, my friend. Infinity's not some flash-in-the-pan, half-baked kind of game. It's not a company who's going to abandon ship on you and cut all support. The game's existed for quite a while. Corvus Belli is a 20-year-old company. Infinity is a 16-year-old game. These folks know what they're doing. You're in safe hands. They've been around a while. So given my glowing review and the veritable drowning pool of froth over Infinity, it would probably be a little bit easy to overlook at this point the fact that maybe some of you are still a little bit reluctant to try it. So first of all, let's have a little chat about that. Let's do some compare and contrast, and maybe we can alleviate some of those fears. One of the big ones that I get fed back to me a lot is that people think that Infinity is too complicated. They hear a lot of tales of the rules being very confusing, there being so many of them. Whilst in the strictest sense this isn't necessarily untrue, it's kind of to do with how you pace yourself. I mean, pretty much every piece of information you need for Infinity, aside from maybe a couple of character-specific special rules, all fits into one book and one app. And it's not a lot. That isn't heavy. You do have this choice with Infinity, and I think people forget this, to follow a route of progression. Start with the quick start missions to get a grasp of the basic mechanics. Progress onto Code 1 as your first way of playing full games. Play enough games of Code 1 that you're really familiar with it, and then start to bolt on the additional layers of complexity that are found in N4. I mean, the other option is kind of diving in at the deep end and trying to tread water, and I don't think that's the way to go. So, for the sake of it being the popular alternative, I want to compare this to 40k as the baseline. I know it's not strictly apples to apples, because 40k is a full-size wargame and Infinity's kind of skirmish-sized, but it is a much more apples to apples comparison on the complexity level, because Infinity's not really a skirmish game at heart. It's a skirmish model count, but it is a fully featured and in-depth war game in terms of how it tries to play. So the basics that you need to play a game of 40k, if you are a player, the things you need to own. Well, an army of miniatures, for a start, that's a given. You'll need the big rulebook. You'll need a codex for your army. You'll need at least a basic understanding of what your opponent's codex does, whether that's from doing a bit of online research or whatever. You're going to want the GT mission pack, and yeah, that is an essential, because if you poll Warhammer players out there, the vast majority of them don't like the missions in the big rulebook. They want to play the missions from the GT mission pack. So you kind of need to own it. A Psychic Awakening supplement? I mean, yeah, not for all armies, but there are some armies that literally can't run without additional rules from their Psychic Awakening if you want them to be remotely viable against the average 9th edition army. You'll need access to all those additional online FAQs and errata. There's 38 of them at this point for 9th edition. It's quite a lot. You're going to need any additional rules for your faction that have come out in a minor publication. And you're still also going to want to supplement that with either Battlescribe or the 40k app. I know most people use Battlescribe, but technically it should be the 40k app. And when you add all of that together, it starts to really put into context just how much lighter Infinity actually is. One book, one app. And like, you know, maybe a couple of additional singular rules, but essentially one book, one app. And again, sure, like there's the arrow system, for example, active reaction orders. I'm still learning the terminology. You'll have to bear with me on that one. But that's a system that allows the defending player to act in their opponent's turn, and it kind of means that both players are much more active at the same time. But again, this isn't super different to how you can spend stratagems in your opponent's turn. Things like Overwatch, for example. Like, it's actually kind of common to do stuff in your opponent's turn. It's just not usually like full active things. And yes, of course, I'm aware that you can steal all of those rules for 40k from Wahapedia and Battlescribe. I obviously already mentioned Battlescribe. Those things, of course, can be got for free. You don't have to spend all of that money on all of those source books. But I'm not about to use piracy as a justification. I'm not about to promote that. I don't think that that's how you should be playing games. So I'm not going to use that to make a comparison. At the end of the day, 40k's rules are just distributed in a very overly complex, convoluted, and hard to access way. But we all still play it. So another thing that might be putting you off is the smaller scale of Infinity's miniatures. They are 28mm, not 32mm. And they're very detail dense at that, which I totally get why that might be a worry for some people, especially if you don't feel the most confident as a painter. And as luck would have it, I'm ahead of the situation because I basically released a video about exactly that, and I'm pointing this way, and I've got a feeling that that pop-up's going to come up over there. It's over there, isn't it? And yeah, we have to mention the one concern to rule them all: cost. So again, I'm going to use now the most popular skirmish game on the market, and this is because it is similar miniature size. This is because the physical things you are buying are of a similar amount. We're going to make a comparison now with Kill Team. So the current and only available starter box, and yes, it is a starter box regardless of what buzzwords GW attaches to it for marketing purposes, is Kill Team Octarius, and that's going to set you back about 125 quid, or a bit cheaper if you buy it from an LGS. And this contains enough minis for 2 players to play a game. I think it's 20 miniatures. It contains the tokens, the dice, the cards. It's got some lovely terrain, and it is really good terrain. And it contains the stat lines for actually just the miniatures that come in the box. And so because of that, you'll also want the Kill Team Compendium, which has like vanilla kind of watered down stats for the rest of the faction. They don't really have any customization to them in the way that you would normally think of for Kill Team, but they are baseline rules that will allow you to play other factions if you don't want to play what's in the box. Owing to how kind of broad and reflexive Kill Team is as a game, people will probably want this as a baseline, so we've got to add about another 25 quid to our costs. So you'll buy in on the assumption that you don't need things like paints, because that's fair enough. It's about 150 quid in order to play Kill Team, and that's actually fine. That's a pretty good buy-in for a skirmish game. It's fair, and it's the kind of budget that you probably would assign to getting into a new facet of the hobby. So I don't have a problem with it. So now let's make a comparison to Infinity, because cost matters, and if you're going to pick up a new game, it needs to be a cost-effective option. Operation Crimson Stone, the latest box set for starting out in Infinity, contains indeed enough miniatures for 2 players. In this case it's 14 or 15 miniatures, but that is still enough miniatures for 2 players to play the game. It contains the dice, tokens, and all that kind of stuff. It contains some really nice terrain. It's a different kind of terrain, but it's really lovely. And then you've got like the quick start rules, which are not full rules, they're stripped down basic rules. And that's going to set you back £80 to £100 depending on where you buy it. So it's a little bit cheaper than the Kill Team box. So we're currently up by somewhere between 10 and 25 quid against Kill Team, depending on what we're paying for various things. And much like Kill Team, you're gonna have to buy something extra with Infinity, really. You're gonna want an additional rulebook. You'll want the Code 1 rules, probably. So that's gonna cost you about £10 to £12, which again is like really cheap for a rulebook. You compare that to the £25 for the compendium that you're gonna have to buy on top of Kill Team, and it starts to feel pretty reasonable. In fact, at this point, if we're comparing apples to apples on prices and assuming that we get both products at the same sort of discount rate, we're about up on buying into Infinity by pretty much exactly the cost of that additional rulebook that you need for Kill Team. But, I hear you cry, I get full stats in Octarius. You just said I don't get full stats in my Infinity box set. Well, no, you don't. That's because you get a fully featured mobile app, completely free of charge. With Kill Team, we've been told to expect quarterly updates, and it's pretty safe to assume at this point that that's going to mean that as additional squads get released for play in Kill Team, that's when the additional rules will be put out as well. We know that Games Workshop never puts stuff like that out for free. We have years of precedent for that. So it's safe to assume that you're basically going to have to be buying quarterly DLC to build up to having access to the full rules for Kill Team. Whereas when new factions are added to Infinity, they go onto the app, which is free. And even has a web version that you can print sheets out from, like Battlescribe, which is free. And this app even covers N4, it's not just for Code 1. It's for both flavours of Infinity. If new stuff comes out, it goes on the app. And that's how it works. That's how it's always worked. So Infinity is actually also cheaper than the most popular skirmish game out there. And the fact that it sits somewhere between a skirmish game and a full war game does make it a little bit awkward, because you can't make completely direct comparisons. But it's cheaper than the most popular war game. It's less complex than the most popular war game. It's cheaper than the most popular skirmish game, and it's just as accessible. So to me, it's preference again, isn't it? We're dealing with preference again. But that cheapness, the fact that Infinity actually costs way less than you might think it does, that was a bit of a stinger for me, to be honest, because the whole reason it took me so long to even get into Infinity was because I thought it was really expensive. Well, that's egg on my face. Right, well, that's enough rambling about this. Infinity it's just really good. It might well be worth a chunk of your attention. It's certainly captured a whole heap of mine. So if, like me, you've been curious, just give it a go. Grab a single blister to get an idea of what the minis are like. Set it up on Tabletop Simulator using the links in the description of this very video and get an idea of what the gameplay is like. I honestly think you won't regret it if you try it. So that's going to be all from me for this one, folks. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and do please make sure that you check the links in the description if you wish to support the channel, because there are a bunch of ways down there that you can do that. All that's left for me to do is wish you happy hobbying. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video, and to say goodbye for now. I'll see you in the next one, folks. Bye-bye for now.